So mantra is supposed to be chanted exactly the way they heard it. Okay? And depending on certain tradition, there are minor variations in terms of how the mantra is chanted. Okay, but beyond that, you cannot sing a mantra with some different tune and some music and all that. That is not acceptable. The way that the knowledge system is evolved as a tree, and let's say that tree has 4 branches that are 4 Vedas, and there are further branches or further aspects which are different components of those Vedas. So Sanhita is actual collection of mantras, and in different Veda, those mantras are also called different things. So in Rigveda it is called Richa, but basically that collection of mantra that was revealed is called Sanhita. The disciple, again, he wanted to learn Yajurveda, so he did Surya Upasana, and Surya came, Surya Narayan, Surya Bhagwan appeared in the form of a vajin or a horse and taught the Yajurveda again, and that is called Shukla Yajurveda. And since it was revealed through horse, it is also called Vajasani Sanhita.
Welcome to all the viewers. Today on Sangam Talks, we have a very special session which is called The Introduction to Vedic Knowledge System. Many of us have heard the word Ved, but very few of us understand the real meaning and structure of the Vedas. In this talk, we will understand Vedas, the components, the key topics in Vedas that have been discussed, as well as the different branches that it falls under. Today, we have our speaker, Parag Bhalerao ji, who was born and raised in Pune, India. He currently lives in the US of A, working in the IT industry. And Parag ji holds a master's degree in science and an MBA in HR and marketing. Since childhood, he has been fascinated by spirituality and inspired by the various writings of Dr. P.V. Vartak. He has taken an initiative to explore the scientific knowledge in various scriptures. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to provide our viewers with an overview of what they can expect from this interview and the book you've authored.
Thank you for the introduction and welcome everyone. We are very excited to present this very special topic in front of all of you. As Ojasvi mentioned, we are going to understand what Vedas are and how Vedas are structured. So what happens is, if we talk to people from different faiths, different belief systems, different, so to say, religions, and if we ask them, what is your principal religious book? Then any Christian, you ask that question, they will say it's Bible. If you ask any Muslim person, they will say it is Quran, and so on. But if you ask a Sanatani Hindu person, then you can get different answers. Some might say it is some Puran, some might say it is something that their guru follows. Some might say it is Bhagavad Gita, some might say something else, which is very interesting because we as a Sanatani people don't go by a set rule that we all must follow. Otherwise, you are not Hindu. That is not the case with Hinduism. But if you look at any scripture that you think as a pramana or standard, its roots will trace back to Vedas. So even though many of us do not follow or understand or know much about Vedas directly, whichever scripture we follow, those are derived, evolved out of, or referred to content or knowledge which is available in Veda. So with that background, we are going to discuss a lot of points which are available in details in a book which is available on Amazon. And this is the name of the book. You can Google it or you can look it up on Amazon and you will find this book, which gives you a lot of deep dive information. Again, at a very high level, very easy to understand format about today's talk or about Vedic knowledge system in general. Okay, so what happens is, when we look at any religious book, and if we try to understand meaning of that book, we may or may not get a very concrete meaning as such. Whereas when we talk about Veda, the word Veda comes from the root word or root dhatu called Vid. Vid means to know, and Veda means knowledge. So whatever we think as foundation of our religion or religious book, that foundation is nothing but knowledge, which is very, very unique and very, very different. So our entire religion, our entire belief system, our entire scriptures are foundationally based on knowledge. And what is knowledge? There is all kinds of knowledge, and we will see few examples as we go through the discussion today. Now, this knowledge was acquired by some sages, and we will see that in a little bit. And later on, that acquired knowledge was grouped into 4 so to say, books or 4 Veda called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. Some of you must have heard these names, and that is the foundation, or those are the 4 Vedas that we think of as Praman or guiding principle. Now, when we talk about some knowledge, the question comes, who invented that knowledge, or who discovered that knowledge, or who wrote this Veda? In our belief system, we accept that the Vedas are not created by humans, and that is why they are called apaurushaya, means not human created. Now, if those are not created by humans, what happened? Who gave that knowledge? How does that knowledge came to people like you and me, or back in the days the sages who understood or revealed this knowledge? So there are 2 different thought processes around it. One is these sages were in deep meditative state, which is known as samadhi state or samadhi avastha, and during that samadhi avastha they realized these Vedas. The second belief system is also that today we have few senses. We have touch and feel and taste and these 5 senses, and probably back then the sages were extremely advanced and they had additional senses, a sense or multiple senses, through which they could acquire this knowledge. And it is these rishis, even if they revealed that knowledge, they were very humble. They said, no, this is not my composition. I did not compose it. It's not my creation. I just heard it in the environment and I'm just reproducing what I heard. So they say that I have not created this knowledge. It is revealed to me and then through me to other people. And that is why they never took any credit for these compositions or creation of Vedas. For some portions of Veda, and we will see a little bit later, but for some portions of Veda, some rishis have mentioned their names. So we know who is the rishi who revealed this knowledge or to whom this knowledge was revealed. But for most of the Vedas, that name is also not known because they were not like saying, oh, this is my copyright, this is my knowledge. No, it is universal knowledge. It's available to everyone. I am just fortunate enough that it was revealed to me and now through me. Okay, so that is the fundamental background about sages who wrote or who revealed this knowledge. The constructs of Veda, or so to say the verses, are called mantra. Now mantra is different than shloka. As I said, these rishis heard this mantra or Veda in their samadhi state or that additional senses. So mantra is supposed to be chanted exactly the way they heard it. Okay? And depending on certain tradition, there are minor variations in terms of how the mantra is chanted. Okay, but beyond that, you cannot sing a mantra with some different tune and some music and all that. That is not acceptable. That is not right. Okay? And that can actually have some adverse effects. So we are supposed to or expected to chant mantra exactly the way those are being taught over thousands of years of tradition. And that is why we are supposed to learn this from Guru and not just read it in some book and try to chant or try to sing it on our own. Now, these rishis to whom these Vedas were revealed, in Sanskrit they are called Drashta rishis, or in English the equivalent word they coined is seers. So these are the seers or Drashta rishis. Okay, and since they heard this Veda, this knowledge, it is called Shruti. That is something that is heard, and we will see in a minute that our entire knowledge system, our entire scriptures fall into 2 broad categories. One is Shruti, which is basically Veda and other aspects associated with Veda, and then the other one is Smriti. We'll see that in a minute. But since Vedas were heard, they are called Shruti Grantha or just Shruti. Initially, Vedas were taught by rishis to their disciples, by Guru to Shishya, so that Guru Shishya Parampara was followed, and that is why this knowledge was never documented in written format. That does not mean there was no lipi or there was no script, and that's why they could not write. There was script, the script did exist, but rishis wanted to make sure that this knowledge is passed on to qualified person in right manner. When it is written, it becomes very difficult to control, right? Anybody can make copies, anybody can rewrite, and so on and so forth. It might get even diluted, altered, and so on. So that is why initially it was never documented. But about 5,000 years ago, 5000 BC, Maharshi Vyas realized that this kind of oral tradition can lead to some challenges and limitations. Sometimes with certain lineages or certain rishis or certain people, some part of the knowledge can get lost. So he took a huge initiative of documenting all the Vedas in written form. So many times people think that Maharshi Vyasa wrote Veda. So if you take a literal understanding of that he wrote or put it in written format, then that is right. He is the first one who wrote it, but he is not the one who composed it. Okay. But that task itself was humongous task, very complex, very difficult task. He had to learn all the four Vedas from proper traditions first, then get it documented and so on. So to honor him for his work, Maharshi Vyas is also called VedVyasa. Vyas itself means his knowledge was extremely widespread. So Vyasa was not his name. His name was Dvaipayan. Okay. But because of his work, he was called Vyasa. And later on, since he did such a humongous work with Veda, he is also honored by the title VedVyasa. After he documented, he knew that this tradition, this knowledge has to be preserved as we move forward. So he called 4 of his disciples and taught one Veda each in detail. So he taught Rigveda to Paila Maharshi, Yajurveda to Maharshi Vaishampaya, Samaveda to Maharshi Jaimini, and Atharva Veda to Maharshi Sumantu. And these 4 disciples later on preserved that knowledge, propagated that knowledge, taught it further to their disciples, and so on. As I said, the knowledge is classified in 2 categories. One is Shruti, means Veda, and whatever is not directly inferred to Veda or directly commented upon Veda, that all that knowledge is called Smriti knowledge. Smriti means somebody thought about it, memorized that, and then wrote it as their own composition or their own commentary or their own interpretations, and so on and so forth. So all those granthas, all those documents are called Smriti Grantha. And we'll in a minute see what falls under Shruti, what falls under Smriti Grantha. So this is a very high level category classification. Under Shruti, we have Veda. So there are 4 primary Vedas or 4 Vedas that we saw: Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharva Veda. And even though I have shown next 3 components, Brahman, Aranyak, and Upanishad under Shruti, those are for corresponding Veda, and we are going to see that in detail. On the Smriti side, there are a lot of text. On the Smriti, there are Itihasa Grantha like Ramayana and Mahabharata. And there are so many Puranas. Then under Purana, there are Dharma Shastra, Sutra. Some additional applied aspects of Vedic knowledge are Vedangas and Upaveda. Vedanga and Upaveda, some people consider those as part of Shruti, but most people consider that as part of Smriti. So we are just going to touch upon all these aspects at a very high level in this discussion today. Now, sometimes the question comes that if I'm following 2 branches of knowledge, one is Shruti, one is Smriti, what if there is a conflict or contradiction? You will never find any conflict or contradiction. The conflict or contradiction can be in the interpretation. So we might interpret certain text in certain way and somebody else in some different way. But it is clearly documented that if you find such contradiction between Shruti and Smriti, between Veda and other literature, then you need to consider Veda as Pramana. You should follow what is written in Veda. So Veda still remain foundation and the Pramana or guiding principle for the rest of the literature or pretty much all the activities and belief systems that we have today. When we do any religious activity, so to say, it is typically there are a lot of karma kanda or ritual. And in those rituals, we worship some god. Now, did these gods exist right from Vedic period? The answer is yes and no. There are the concept of God or concept of deity that we follow today was different in Vedic period. In Vedic period, various natural forces, natural powers, natural energies were considered as Devtaas. They were not in the form of human. Later on, some humans, because of their extraordinary capabilities, were associated with certain powers in the nature, and we started worshipping those humans or those people. Also, it's a very common behavior that a lot of energies or a lot of these powers are personified. So, simple example, in any Puranic stories or any Purana-based TV serials or movies, you will see, I'm just taking example, Chandra, you will see Chandra as a human. Now, Chandra is not a human, we know that, but it is always personified so that humans can relate to it, human can see it in a visual format and then believe in it, offer, pray to it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that happens a lot in our belief system, that a lot of these energies that are assumed as devatas are later on personified in human form. That does not mean those are actual physical humans. So some of the aspects, some of these powers or energies that were considered as devatas in Vedic period are Varuna, Surya, Chandra, Agni, Usha, Vayu, that is wind, and so on and so forth. Those were all natural aspects. Then certain emotional aspects are also considered as deities. So Mana, Buddhi, Kama, all those feelings, these emotions are also considered as different devatas or deities. And then there are other aspects such as Gandharva, Yaksha, Kinnara, and so on and so forth. Those were also some forms of deities that are mentioned in Vedic literature or Vedic text. Okay? So everything that is around us, everything that exists in the nature, everything is considered as devata. Now this is very powerful because when you look at something as a devata, as a god or as a deity, you will treat that with extreme respect, extreme love. Now imagine if every aspect of nature is devata, we will treat every aspect of nature as a devata and treat it with respect. That means we will not cause, or we will at least try to minimize destruction to the nature, destruction to the surroundings, destruction to the atmosphere, destruction to the earth and water, and so on and so forth, right? So it is very powerful concept that we have followed in our religious practices. Now, over the period of time, human race becomes demanding, and a lot of things happen because of which that respect aspect starts to dilute. But even today, in every ritual, we do worship many natural forces or many aspects of the nature. Now, what kind of knowledge is there in Veda? Pretty much any aspect of knowledge you can think of, we will see traces, evidences, or some aspects described or explained in different parts of Veda. Now, I have just mentioned a few here at the bottom. You will see there is astronomy. Now, astronomy was huge in Vedic period. There were a lot of references, lot of study, lot of analysis, lot of understanding of astronomy and effect of different astronomical aspects on Earth and on human life. That was studied in extreme details. And we are not talking about astrology, we are talking about astronomy. So a lot of astronomical references, including creation of the universe, including eclipses, including all the movements of sun and moon and so on and so forth, the seasons, all those things are described in details in various Vedic aspects or Vedic texts. Similarly, architecture is mentioned, agriculture is mentioned, metallurgy is mentioned, medical, warfare, social studies, social laws. All these things you will find tremendous references if we study the Vedic scripture. And of course, there are certain supplementary texts that were extracted out of Veda with specific aspect in mind. For example, architecture. Architecture related aspects from all Vedas were extracted in a separate text, and it was called Sthapatya Veda. And today's Vastu Shastra and so on and so forth, that is evolved from Sthapatya Veda. Similarly, for medicine, we all have heard of Ayurveda. That is also knowledge extracted, medical or medicine related knowledge extracted from different Veda, formed in a different text called Ayurveda. So you will find very fascinating details mentioned in Vedic scriptures or Vedic literature that is applied very, very practical even today. Now, when we look at Veda as a one aspect or entity, Veda is divided into 4 components. As you will see on the left side, Veda has Sanhita, then there are Brahmanas, then there are Aranyakas, and there is Upanishad. So what are these aspects? So we'll see that at a very high level real quick. So as you see, the way that the knowledge system is evolved as a tree. And let's say that tree has 4 branches that are 4 Vedas. And there are further branches or further aspects which are different components of those Vedas. So Sanhita is actual collection of mantras. And in different Veda, those mantras are also called different things. So in Rigveda, it is called Richa. But basically, that collection of mantra that was revealed is called Sanhita. Now, some of those Sanhitas were little difficult to understand, little difficult to explain, little difficult to apply in certain processes. So the Brahman Grantha are written, which gives additional commentary about these Samhitas and detailed explanation about certain rituals. That is given in Brahman. Aranyaka, as the word indicates, Aranya means forest or jungle. So certain sages went into forest and started contemplating, started analyzing these Samhitas, started to understand the deep knowledge, deep secrets in these Samhitas. And those were explained or described in different texts called Aranyaka. Some Vedas, some Aranyakas itself are Upanishads, or in some cases, the tail part of Aranyaka is Upanishad. But what is Upanishad? Upanishad basically is again additional knowledge or additional explanation of Vedic knowledge. And most of the Upanishads come in the discussion format. So it's a dialogue between Guru and Shishya. And Guru is explaining certain aspects to Shishya. Shishya is asking questions. They're giving more explanation and so on. But the entire knowledge is further explained in more simplified format in a dialogue or interaction format in Upanishad. So Rigveda, if you look at, Rigveda has few Samhitas, Shakal and Bashkal, and it has Aitareya, Aranyaka. Then it has Aitareya Brahman, Kaushitaki Brahman, and Sankhya Brahman. And there are three primary Upanishads associated with Rigveda. One is Aitareya, Bashkal and Kaushitaki. When you go to Yajurveda, Yajurveda has two branches. Yajurveda has Shukla and Krishna Yajurveda. And Krishna Yajurveda has different Aranyaka, Taittiriya and Maitrayani. And it has Taittiriya Brahman. And there are multiple Upanishads. Taittiriya, then Maitreya Upanishad, and Shvetashvatara Upanishad, and so on. All these part of Krishna Yajurveda. The Shukla Yajurveda has Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and Brihadaranyaka itself has two branches, Maitrayani and Kathaka. Then it has similar way two Brahman Grantha, and there are few interesting Upanishads. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Ishavasya Upanishad, you must have heard these names. Very, very good Upanishads. If you get a chance, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is beautiful. Kathopanishad, beautiful. Again, not to discriminate, say one is better than other, but these are some very, very good texts we must read at some point. The Samaveda has Kauthum and Pranayani and Jaimini, those three branches. And then there are multiple Brahmins. Tandya Brahman you must have heard of, or Ashreya is there, and Jaimini is there, so on and so forth. There are different Brahmins. There is Kena and Chandogya. These are two primary Upanishads. Those are associated with Samaveda. And Atharva Veda has Shaunak and Pippalad Samhitas. Gopatha Brahman, again, you must have heard this name, Gopatha Brahman, or even Shatapatha Brahman, which is another Brahman which is very well known. So those are, Shatapatha is also Shukla Yajurveda, and then Gopatha Brahman is Atharva Veda. But one of the very well known Brahmins. And Atharva Veda has multiple Upanishads. There are so many Upanishads. Those are associated with Atharva Veda. Okay, so Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, these are all Upanishads which are associated with Atharva Veda. So that is the high level structure. We saw what is Samhita, Brahman, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. Samhitas is the mantras that we heard. The primary purpose is to invoke gods, praise gods, so on and so forth. The person who is educated in Vedic knowledge system and participates in rituals is called Ritvik. Ritvik is the person who is knowledgeable or knowledgeable in Veda. And based on different Veda, there are different Ritviks or 4 types of Ritvik, one for each Veda. So the Ritvik that is primarily focused on Rigveda is called Hota. The Yajurveda Ritvik is called Adhvaryu. Samaveda is called Udgata. And Atharva Veda is called Brahma. Brahmans, as we discussed, they provide additional explanation, detailed discussions about philosophical aspects and rituals in Yajna rituals. Now here I want to make one quick comment. When we think about Yajna, typically we think that there is a fire altar, there are bricks laid, and ahutis are given or oblations are given in the Agni. That is Yajna. That is just one form of Yajna. Any structured process with proper intent to accomplish something is Yajna. So even eating food is considered as Yajna, right? Taking shower is considered, or taking bath is considered as Yajna. So every activity is Yajna. The Yajna is not limited to making offerings in the fire. That leads to a lot of confusion in a lot of interpretations, especially in the form of what we offer as Ahuti and what does Yajna really mean. This we talk about which are the Brahman Grantha associated with different branches of Veda. We also discussed what are the Aranyaka. Those are contemplations made in distance from main cities so that the contemplation and philosophical interpretations become easy. We saw what is Upanishad, what are the Upanishads associated with different Veda. As I said, based on Vedic knowledge, a lot of sages extracted certain portion of the knowledge which is relevant in one specific aspect and documented that as a different Veda. And those Veda or those supplementary texts are called Upaveda. And as we briefly discussed, there are four primary Upavedas. One is Ayurveda, and we all know what is Ayurveda. It is all the medicine, medical sciences, medical treatments, surgeries, all these aspects are described in details in Ayurveda. Ayurveda is primarily derived from Rigveda, but again, there are different sections are derived from different Veda. So the primary content is from from Rigveda, but the Sushruta Samhita says that it is primarily derived from Atharva Veda. Then next is Dhanurveda. Dhanurveda is knowledge about warfare. Now, warfare does not only mean one aspect of the war. It addresses warfare as a very comprehensive topic. So it has a discussion about weaponry. What are the weapons? What are the type of weapons? What are the explosives? What are the different ways you launch a weapon, right? All these things, what are the effects of those weapons? And when you're building the weapons, most weapons obviously are built using some metal. So the knowledge of metals and metal alloys is also extremely important while building the weapons. So the metallurgy aspects are also discussed in details in Dhanurveda. Because if you're building the sword, you need to know what sword you need to build, which will have optimal weight, optimal strength, optimal power, and so on and so forth. And it will not rust easily, it will last longer, all those aspects. So the composition of the metal which goes in building that sword is also important. A lot of knowledge about explosives or those are called astra. So shastra is something that you hold in your hand and then fight. Astra is something that you launch like a missile and fight. So there is a lot of description and discussions available. Then next is Gandharva Veda. Gandharva Veda is primarily from Samaveda. Samaveda, all the mantras are sung. Samaveda, the name itself means mantra sung. That is what Samaveda literally means. So all the knowledge related to music as well as other art is extracted from Samaveda and formed into a different Veda called Gandharva Veda. And the last and most important is Shilpa Veda, is also called Sthapatya Veda, which is more about architecture. Now, when you think about architecture, typically we think of, okay, how do I construct a building? So typically in modern days, the architecture aspects are limited to building a building, one building, constructing one building or whatever, a couple of buildings. Whereas Sthapatya Veda or Shilpa Veda addresses much comprehensive aspects of a building. It has aspects about town planning, road planning, the water supply planning, the sewage planning, all kinds of aspects, the different aspects. If you build an entire town, what all things are there as a part of that town? All those aspects are addressed. So it is very, very comprehensive knowledge and not just limited to one aspect of constructing one building or one wall or whatever, right? So that is collected in Sthapatya Ved or Shilpa Ved, which is extracted mostly from Atharva Veda. Then, based on additional aspects of Veda in more of a literal or literature kind of format, there are a few aspects which are called Vedanga. Vedanga or limbs or additional aspects of Veda. So there are 6 such Vedangas. The first one is Shiksha, which deals with pronunciation, phonetics, how to chant certain alphabet, what is the right pronunciation of certain alphabet, how the words are combined, how those are separated, and so on and so forth in the recitation context. Those are discussed in Shiksha Grantha. Then Chanda is like a meter, poetic meter. So how to construct a verse or how to construct a mantra, how many syllables should be there, what should be the format, so on and so forth. Those kind of aspects. Again, the beauty about the poetic aspect, it's described in Chanda. Vyakaran is a grammar. So all the language related rules and details around that, Those are discussed in Vyakarana. Nirukta is another branch. Nirukta discusses etymology of different words. So what is the origin of the word? What does that word really mean? Where does it come from? All those aspects, the background of a word or etymology of different words is discussed in Nirukta. Kalpa talks details about rituals. Now, when we perform a ritual during Sankalpa, we always say Kalpokta Phala Praptyartham, to get the rewards that are discussed in the Kalpa. So that is the word you might know, or the context of Kalpa you might know in various rituals. So, but various ritual related aspects are discussed in Kalpa, and Jyotisha discusses both astronomy and astrology. Typically, when we talk about Jyotisha today, we think it is only astrology, but it is not just astrology, it is astronomy and timekeeping, time measurement, planetary motions, all those aspects are discussed in Jyotisha Shastra. So those are Vedanga. So we looked at what are the Veda, what are the four Veda, what are the further branches or components of the Veda. We talked about what is the Upaveda, what is Vedanga. We also understood a little bit about difference between Shruti and Smriti. Okay? So at a high level, that is the whole construct of Vedic knowledge system. And as I discussed, there is a book available on Amazon called Sacred Scrolls, which explains all these aspects, and it has a lot more details about each of the Veda, each of the Vedanga, each of the Upaveda, and little bit discussion about Ityasa Grantha and so on. So this book will be very, very handy for you to understand or get a good grasp of what the Vedic knowledge system and how it is structured. And it is important for all of us being Sanatani to at least know the structure, know at least at a high level what is our founding principle. Okay, how do we come about? How do our traditions, our rituals, our knowledge system, our dharma, our do's and don'ts, where they come from, how they come from. So it is very important, and I'll highly encourage all of us to go through this book and learn and understand these aspects about our religion and our scripture.
Is it true that Vedas are not supposed to be read by women, or women are not allowed to study Vedas?
Okay, it's a very good question, and this question comes a lot, and especially in today's world, there are a lot of discussions going on around discrimination, feminism, and so on. So this is a very important question, Ojasvi. Nowhere in Vedic scripture it is ever mentioned that women are not allowed to read, recite, or practice Vedas. In fact, you will be surprised that I talked about seers, the rishis who learned or heard these Veda and revealed those. Many of those sages are female. There are a lot of women who contributed to the construct of Veda. So if women were part of constructing the Veda, or the Veda was revealed to some of the women, it is very not so intelligent to say that women are not allowed to read Veda. Okay, it is absolutely wrong. Now, with that said, there are certain aspects. When we recite the mantra chanting creates vibration, and that is why it is very important to recite and chant mantra in proper fashion. Okay, but the vibrations create different effect, and the body structure of men and women is different. So in certain period of time, certain vibrations might be harmful to women. So in those situations or those mantra, it is prescribed not to chant, not to be chanted by women. And again, it is limited to chanting. That does not mean they cannot know, they cannot read, but they should not chant those, because those vibration might have adverse effect on women. But that apart, there is no mention ever anywhere that women cannot read or study Veda. It is absolutely allowed.
What are exactly the Suktas? Since one of the talks that you have given on Sangamar were also on Purusha Sukta, which your preceding book has been about. What are Suktas, and how are they connected or not connected to Veda?
So we saw that there are four Veda, and now when you look at Veda is not a one topic they start and the entire Ved just keeps talking about that, right? The Ved is split into multiple different Ved, call it differently, but mandala or different sections, and each section is further divided into smaller segments, and those segments are called Sukta. Sukta literally means Su Ukta, well said, and it is basically collection of certain mantra, and each sukta is corresponding or associated with one aspect. For example, you mentioned Purusha Sukta. It is related to creation of universe. So the topic of creation of universe is addressed in multiple places, but the collection of mantra in one specific context that talk about creation of universe, that collection forms one sukta. So sukta is basically collection of mantra, and each Veda has suktas. So there are, I don't know the exact count, but there are hundreds or maybe thousands of sukta. So each Veda is divided, or specific mantra are collected together to form a sukta.
Another question, sir, going again to the part of where women are discussed. There are a lot of people who put the Yajurveda under a lot of scrutiny, saying that it criticizes women in several ways. It comments on their existence, their usefulness to society, and their IQ. So, what would you say to them?
I have not heard anything in that context. Of course, in a male-dominant society, they will come up with any stories to suppress authorities of women, right? And that is not just between men and women. Even in any society, you will see that one society, one part of the society that tries to establish dominance will suppress every aspect of other part of the society. So some people might have said that, but there is never a question about intellect of women in any part of our tradition. Even today, if you see, there are a lot of organizations where women are in leader position. If you go a few hundred years back, there were Rani Lakshmibai, Ahilya Devi Holkar, and so on. So many women who have done magnificent work towards our freedom fighting. Right? If you go further back, you will always see that women are always respected. In our religion, women are always respected and worshipped. They are treated with extreme respect and extreme love. So all these things that we hear, those are just fake stories built by different people to establish their dominance or suppress women.
Another question about the Yajurveda is that why are there only two branches for Yajurveda?
Very good question. So each Veda had just one branch, but Yajurveda has two prominent branches, Shukla and Krishna. And the story goes that Maharshi Vyas taught Yajurveda to Vaishampayan. And Vaishampayan had his one of the best disciples to whom he taught the entire Yajurveda. Now later on, for some reason, there was a fight or argument or disagreement between Guru and Shishya. And that went to the extreme where the Guru said, "You're not my disciple anymore. Whatever I taught you, give it back to me." Now, from that point, there are two different stories again. One says that then the disciple vomited. He threw up all the knowledge. Now, knowledge you cannot literally throw in the form of vomit, but that's one part of the story. And then there were few birds called Tittari birds who came and ate that vomit, and they gained that knowledge. But the second thing is, a second part of the story is there was a rishi called Tittari who was also a disciple of Vaishampayan. So Vaishampayan called Tittari and asked other disciple, "Okay, you teach everything back to my rest of the disciples, including Tittari." So when that knowledge was taught, now what happens is if I tell you something and you try to tell it back to me or anybody, there will be some variation. You will tell it in your own way. It might be a little bit out of sequence. You might use different words than I use. So when it was retaught to other disciples, there were some variations or there was possibility of some variations. So it maybe this is wrong way to say it, but in some aspect, the purity or authenticity of that knowledge was disturbed. That is why that knowledge which was given back is called Krishna Yajurveda. Right? And then the disciple again, he wanted to learn Yajurveda, so he did Surya Upasana, and Surya came, Surya Narayan, Surya Bhagwan appeared in the form of a vajin or a horse and taught the Yajurveda again, and that is called Shukla Yajurveda. And since it was revealed through horse, it is also called Vajasani Sanhita, the Sanhita that was revealed in that fashion. So that is the reason, because of those disagreements between Guru Shishya, that is why that knowledge or that Ved was split into two variations or two aspects. That did not fortunately happen in any other Veda. So other Veds have only one part or one branch.
So since you talked about this very impalpable and a very complex idea of knowledge, which has been in some way tried to be encapsulated through stories like the throw up of knowledge. So, what are some of the examples of knowledge that are documented in the Vedas?
So this is very interesting. The example that we just saw, that somebody threw up something as a knowledge and some birds picked that up and they become knowledgeable. Now you will see a lot of such stories. You will see a story of Indra and Vritrasura fighting and then releasing water. And that is just again one example, but there are so many natural phenomena are documented in Veda. And just to make it very easy to understand or easy to remember, those are built in a story format. And we also saw that a lot of these Devtaas, a lot of these deities are personified. So Indra is personified, Vritrasura is personified, Moon is personified. Moon is supposed to have multiple wives. Now, how is that possible? How can Moon, which is a satellite or planet, how can it have wives, right? So those are different nakshatras through which it travels. So those are considered as his wives. And then how they realized the principle of waxing and waning and the frequency and systematic way of moon waxes and wanes. So to explain that story, the story was formed that okay, the moon was cursed by Daksha and moon was going to die. Then Bhagwan Shankarji gave him a boon that okay, you will not die, but you will decay for 15 days. Then you will again go in your full form so those are all different examples of certain aspects of the nature, certain phenomena in the nature are described in the story way so that it is easy to understand. The sad part is when these stories were formed and when those were initially taught in oral tradition, those were taught along with those background principles. What does that story signify? Over the period of time, those background principles were forgotten, but the stories existed. And a lot of people don't understand what these stories really mean. And then it becomes very difficult to believe in this story. It's very difficult to believe that, okay, Moon got married to multiple wives. I mean, what does that even mean, right? Or somebody called Indra, he came and he fought a war with a asura called Vritrasura and then released water. What does it even mean, right? So we need to understand the context and understand the exact meaning of those stories.
So another question is that if there are 4 Vedas, then what does Vedatryi indicate?
So initially, there were only 3 Vedas. Okay, Rigveda, Yajurveda, and Samaveda. And those 3 Vedas are called Vedatryi. Trayi means 3, right? So those Vedatryi is those 3 Vedas. The Atharva Veda was established much later. And initially, it is said that for longest period of time, the Vedic seers, Vedic experts or sages did not accept Atharva Veda as a Veda. But later on, the Atharva Veda has a lot of aspects related to common man and day-to-day life and day-to-day activities. So it is considered, it was considered back in the days as inferior because Vedic knowledge is supposed to be sacred. It is only for people who have really learned, put in a lot of effort to study, whereas now Atharva Veda is available to everyone and it addresses a lot of day-to-day aspects. You will be surprised at a lot of black magic kind of a thing. And I say it just to explain the context, but black magic kind of things are discussed in Atharva Veda, so every common person can use that and accomplish something or cause something. So that is why it was initially not accepted as a part of core Veda, but eventually the knowledge which is discussed there was really profound knowledge. So slowly it became accepted as 4th Veda, and then it became 4 Veda. Till then it was 3, and that is what the Vedatryi was.
Sir, another question is that do the Vedas support or promote Pashubali? There are several temples around India that still have some form of Pashubali. Like there's Rajarappa, for example, in Ramgarh, in Jharkhand, where baby goats are still sacrificed, saying that it is a sacrifice to Ma Parvati. So, what does Pashubali mean? And is it promoted in the way that it's told to us it is promoted?
Honestly, if we study Vedic aspects or Vedic knowledge, there is no promotion of any Pashubali in the sense of killing a living animal. Veda believes that everything is creation of the Paramatma. So there is no discrimination between humans and non-humans, right? So killing any animal is as sinful as killing a human. So there is no such mention. There are certain cryptic ways, or there are certain things described in Veda which get interpreted differently. For example, in Ashwamedha Yajna, there is a mention that you have to have the horse, and at the end of the yajna you sacrifice that horse. Whereas the word Ashwamedha itself has nothing to do with Ashwa. It has Medha is our intellect, and the Ashwa indicates certain aspects of the body, and those aspects we have to burn or sacrifice, which are bad tendencies which we need to sacrifice as a part of Ashwamedha Yajna. Right, but it gets interpreted as if you have to kill the horse. Similarly, in Purusha Sukta, there is a mention called Abadhan Purusham Pashu. So there was a Pashu, there is no mention of which Pashu, that was sacrificed in the Yajna. Now again, in Rigvedic period, we saw that Yajna does not necessarily mean physical fire lit and ahutis are given, right? And where that mantra comes, that richa comes, where it says Abadhan Purusham Pashu, the animal life on the earth is not even formed. It's a sequential description, right? So if the animal life is not formed, how can you sacrifice the animal, right? So that again, the interpretation is different, or the purpose is different. It got interpreted wrongly. Now, over thousands of years, some of these wrong interpretations led to different traditions. Now, the tradition becomes little different than the core prescribed rituals in Vedic Sanhitas or in Vedas. So, these traditions then became prominent and they were practiced for again thousands of years. So, it says that yes, it is our tradition and I have to sacrifice such and such animal to such and such god or goddess. But to my knowledge, with whatever my study goes, I have not seen a direct mention of Pashubali in any of the Vedic literature.
Just a follow-up on the Ashwamedha Yajna. Colloquial re-narrations of the Ramayana talk about how the Ashwamedha Yajna was employed by Ayodhya to take hold of other kingdoms surrounding them. So, does that mean that there was a misinterpretation back then as well, or that maybe that was a different literary representation of this?
Yes, as a part of Ashwamedha Yajna, the Ashwa or the horse was set free, and wherever it travels, that particular kingdom either has to fight a war and win the war, or accept supremacy of the person who is king who is performing the yajna. So that aspect is right. But at the end, sacrificing or killing that horse is not right. Even in many cases, it is that animal is set free. So nobody owns that animal from that point. Even you will see that tradition in some villages today. The sacrificial animal is just set free, so it just roams around in the village and everybody takes care of that animal. So in same way, you set that animal free at the end. I don't see any again, if I say that I don't see any reference, people can argue because there are references, but those are, best of my knowledge, those are misinterpretations, whether we need to kill that animal or set that animal free.
Another question is, sir, that why don't we see deities worshipped today to be mentioned in the Vedas?
In Vedic era, many of these deities didn't even exist, right? All the forms of nature are worshipped as deities, and later on those were impersonified. And then that in the process of personification, what happened is then we personified one of the energies as Vishnu. Right? Vishnu is something that has spread all over the universe, in entire Vishwa. That energy is Vishnu. Yes, we personify that in the form of human body. Great, no problem. But then we start people who have extraordinary capabilities to associate them with Vishnu or with Shiva or with different deities. And then we start worshipping those people, right? And even Bhagwan Ram, he was a human who existed on the earth. Bhagwan Krishna, human, existed on earth, and that those are little old examples, maybe 5,000-7,000 years old. But even in today's world, you will see, I'm from Maharashtra, right? So Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is literally worshipped because of his extraordinary contribution towards humanity, right? And there are so many other sages, so many other kings, they are worshipped today. And in the same fashion, people with extraordinary capabilities were assumed or believed to be having those divine abilities, extraordinary powers, which came from certain deity. And then we say that they are form of that deity and worship. So, but they did not exist back then. So back then only all the nature forces, nature powers and energies existed.
So my concluding question would be on Kanyadaan. So a lot of our marriage rituals and the chanting that goes on during the wedding ceremony or during the Jayada Homa our Rigvedic hymn. So when people misinterpret Kanyadaan as a woman being objectified and hence being charitably given away to the boy's family or the groom's family, that is a very gross misinterpretation of what exactly it means. So could you set the record straight on that?
So, dana, rather any Sanskrit word has multiple meanings, right? If you are giving me a dana, that means you have something of value which I don't have, and you are giving it to me. So I am in the receiving stage. So in context, I'm kind of inferior and you are superior, right? Because I'm taking something from you, right? So if you look at it again, forget Vedic context for a second, but even in practical context, I have something of value, which is my daughter. I'm giving it to you so that she can take care of you and your family and the society. So that is the concept, that is the construct. And it is not really one party is superior, one party is inferior, right? So it is just for, for human race, that marriages are important and progenies are important. And that whole process is supposed to be very divine and sacred process, and we don't believe or we don't allow marriages or progeny outside the married relationship because of, again, what you call medical or different specific reasons, cultural reasons. So it is not that one person cannot marry a girl in another caste or community or religion. It has nothing to do with the social aspect of it. It has to do with very practical aspect, because each family is grown with certain traditions, certain principles, certain habits, and if two people from totally different such backgrounds come together, there are likely to be more conflict, right? And that is why those certain guidelines are provided. But again, coming back to Kanyadaan, it is not an inferior aspect of a woman is objectified and giving away as a part of a physical object. That is not the thought process behind it.
Sir, thank you very much for answering some very common doubts and misconceptions people may carry with regard to Vedas. We hope to have many such talks with you, and whenever this book does publish, we would be more than happy to link it in our description so that it is easier to access by our viewers. Thank you very much. Namaste.